All right, everyone, welcome to Pixel Vision Podcast. This is Deft Beck.
I'm Rez. This is my channel, but I'm not the first one talking for some reason.
And we got a special guest today. We got Rez's friend Shoes.
I'm Shoes.
Is not his real name. Unless he's got really mean.
We found him on the street.
We found him at the Goodwill.
We fed him KFC and we got him a nice sweater.
So today's topic of interest is the first-person shooter.
Yeah.
So in our usual format, we're going to talk about the past of the genre, the present case of the genre,
And the future
of first-person shooters.
Yes.
So, what were the first-person shooters, Rez?
I don't know. I'll be straight up honest with you. I don't totally know off the top of my head what.
Technically, one of the first ones was like Faceball 2000, right? No, I'm joking. I'll mention that in a second. But one of the first popular ones was Wolfenstein 3D.
Yes.
On DOS.
Which was followed up by Doom, I believe, correct? Right?
Yes, same developers.
And that was ID Software.
Or
Yeah, that's about
id Software.
ID. Do you think they ever thought about that, the company?
No, they call it id. If you watch the Carmack videos, it's id.
It's called Ed.
Yeah.
I like that more.
And then by the 90s, you had stuff like Quake, which is one of the first major 3D first-person shooters.
Yeah.
Then one of the first big console multiplayer first-person shooters was GoldenEye, and then the same developer Rareware followed up with Perfect Dark.
Right. Like console first-person shooters, though, I want to distinguish here and choose weigh in on this whenever you want. Essentially, that with first-person shooters, I don't know a ton about their history in terms of going really far back because I wasn't really a PC gamer in the really early 90s. I mean, I was born in 1990, so I'm not that old.
I think
you're even younger than me.
A certain generation, you might have had a 386 computer. It depends on whether your parents did work on the computer and say, "Oh, you can play a game, kid. Here's an M-rated game." Or they didn't have the ESRB back then, so whatever was fun.
Yeah, now we have the ESRB and we still give a 5-year-old Call of Duty. It's all good.
Honestly,
that accomplished a lot.
That's an interesting conversation because I've always said that, to a certain extent, Call of Duty and other first-person shooters like that, they never I've heard the term called sexy violence, where you get to see the gore and the visceral impact of it, but you don't necessarily see the consequences of your violence, really.
Well, I think that's interesting. Just to focus, Call of Duty and Battlefield did actually come out. Battlefield in 1942, the original Call of Duty, and then 2, and a whole bunch of expansion packs. Were originally PC games. Oh, something I forgot to mention, too, on here, actually. But I was going to mention it verbally. Counter-Strike, too. So, I think the late...
Counter-Strike, Unreal Tournament, they were among some of the big, first, you would go on GameSpy, remember, flashback to that, and you would go and, search for a lobby, and then you would join in there.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's fine. Like I said, she was just jumping whenever, but what I'm saying is the first thing to focus on is the fact that, first-person shooters first just existed on, early PC games. We talked about Wolfenstein, Doom, and everything. And then you also had stuff that deviated from just the actual formula of walking and just shooting from a first-person view perspective. So you had, System Shock, for example, which had more horror elements to it. It was still first-person view and everything, but bled into BioShock in the future. But they were really rare on consoles, and I think what really started with consoles was Doom got ported to everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
Even the 32X, pretty infamously.
It's the best looking version. It just sounds terrible.
It ends on a DOS prompt.
Are you serious?
After the credits play, it ends on an empty DOS prompt that you have to reset the game to actually.
That's the laziest port I think I've ever heard of in my life.
Yeah.
Well, I think even the Jaguar version looks just like the PC version, but has absolutely no music whatsoever. Just sound effects. So, as ABGN, the Angry Video Game Nerd said, just throw on some Slayer and you're good to go.
I know
if you play that version. If you have a Jaguar that works, and a Jaguar CD, and just happen to want to play Doom. Actually, I think it's just a cartridge. But still, it's a weird way to want to play Doom.
Plus, there was one Doom port that I remember was there was a genius programmer person who ended up getting... There was a person at their church who got the license to it, and that a church. No, okay. So a dude who like was a big churchgoer got the license, like some businessman in Texas got the rights to get this particular port of Doom done, and then they gave it to one programmer person, and this programmer was like, okay, I have like 6 months to do this port. I don't have all these resources and the money to do it. It's like, yeah, you'll get it done. And then the church dude was like, hey, if I draw this gun in the program and you put it in the game, will it work?
Yeah, sure, why not? So everybody asks a programmer that doesn't know programming, basically. Can you do this? Oh, in theory, I could do it. Yeah, why not? We'll figure it out.
But what was cool is that this dude actually was in like a band with his friends at church, and they covered the whole Doom soundtrack that was in Red Book Audio.
That's pretty epic.
Yeah, but back on kind of subject as to like the fundamental days of the FPS, it was more or less like, at least at first it was like a single player kind of experience until the multiplayer thing with Doom 2 and stuff kind of emerged.
Yeah, I would say so. I think also like
there was Doom 1 multiplayer, but Doom 2 I think is where it really exploded in the late 90s.
Yeah, and that's also where you could say that first-person shooters started getting like modding communities and stuff being very active, especially...
Yeah, everyone made WADs, even...
Dude, my coworker, my level 2, when I was a level 1 help desk technician at a call center, was telling me he used to make Doom WADs all the time. So, I mean, what does that tell you? That I just find anybody that does that? But, when I was saying, though, regarding that is, I think the first-person shooters at first, a lot of it was, much like, I guess, games in general of that time, they weren't really taking things very seriously.
It was all very
campy. Yeah, it was either excessively violent and campy, or it was essentially just meant to just to have fun. Which, I mean, you know, games having fun. What's that in the year 2019? I don't know. Let's go complain about game journalism for 10 hours. And
even early Tribes was that first-person shooter, right?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
And then they invented like the random square term Shazbot, right?
Think so.
Yeah, that's where it popularized.
I could not confirm that, but maybe someone in the comments probably will, obviously. Yeah. But yeah, I didn't really play a lot of first-person shooters like in the early 90s. Like I said, all I had was an NES, a Super Nintendo, and my cousin had a Genesis, and that was the extent of, if you want to count Windows for work groups or Windows 3 with colored dinosaurs as a game system. I don't know what else to tell you.
It was far from the days where you could just go and download a free-to-play game and you could start playing it immediately.
I am a hardcore retro gamer. My favorite retro game is Ski Freak.
What you would do, for those too young to remember it, is you would get like a shareware disc. Or like you would go onto like I wasn't young enough for BBSs. You would go on like to a website and it's like, wow, you could download Doom, and then you could play a couple levels, and it would ask you to like buy it, either like faxing like some money to like id Software, or like otherwise mailing it to them for a license key.
56K modem.
For Steam.
Sending in an actual physical letter for a license key, because back then keychains actually weren't everywhere.
And plus, we were talking about console FPSs. GoldenEye's whole multiplayer thing was a complete fluke. Yeah. It was just something they were fooling around with at the end of Rare were making the license game for the GoldenEye movie. And they thought it was fun enough that houses were like, sure, go and develop it and do like a main mode. And it became one of the first console shooters people kind of took sort of seriously.
I would say GoldenEye was like the gateway to multiplayer first-person shooters.
Local multiplayer.
Console. Yeah, local. Yeah, especially because the N64's biggest draw was the 4-controller port. And GoldenEye was an N64 exclusive. And yeah, there's been multiple adapters and stuff for the NES and the SNES before, but I really biased them. I think I'm the only kid I know within like my entire town that had a multi-tap for the PS2, and I really just bought it to play Gauntlet Dark Legacy with a bunch of friends.
So funny is that a lot of like the language of the console multiplayer first-person shooters kind of disappeared as people are, everyone has their own screen now, so people know about like screen cheating and other multiplayer first-person shooter kind of tricks.
Yeah, shoot. I think at that point you could probably weigh in, because I know you definitely played GoldenEye and
You screen cheated, didn't you?
I did a couple times, actually. When I used to do the local multiplayer. I really didn't play a lot of the multiplayer for the GoldenEye, but I did do a lot of playing the Perfect Dark. So I want to say with like the actual first-person shooter, it's kind of a tie between GoldenEye and Perfect Dark for like as far as like console-based first-person shooters go.
That's interesting to say too, because both GoldenEye and Perfect Dark were developed by Rare, but Perfect Dark itself was a much more technically competent game that the N64 basically could not run at full speed.
You can't Perfect Dark for the uninitiated, very late gen N64 game. If you weren't playing the game with the expansion pack, you can only play effectively a quarter of the game.
Yeah, even with the expansion pack, I still don't think it honestly played as well as whatever Rare developed it on, whatever PC system they had developed it on, honestly.
Well, if you had Rare Replay, you could play like the nice spanking new version.
Yeah, which actually plays a lot better than the 360 sequel, which is a gigantic mess, which I'm gonna get to that eventually.
Still a nice looking mess. I mean,
yeah, it's nice for like an early launch 360 title. We get a little ahead of ourselves, though.
Yeah, another thing I want to... Sorry, go on.
Well, I was saying, get a little ahead of ourselves with that in terms of console first-person shooters. GoldenEye, I would say, is the gateway. Perfect Dark was just a bit of a segue, because, I mean, at the same time, even if you played Perfect Dark multiplayer more, it is more so the same thing, just more polished. And obviously the copyrighted GoldenEye characters were removed, because it was 007 after all.
I'm thinking in terms of 98, 99, I think this sort of... Drawing it like this is interesting for basis of a conversation. So on the console, you either had... No one really played FPSs on the PS1. I mean, there were FPSs on the PS1.
You had some weird, like, attempts at FPSs, too. I remember also, like, talking about the N64, you had Turok.
Yes.
That was a thing.
I mean, it was very important.
It's not a bad game by any stretch of the imagination, but it was definitely strange. For a first-person shooter, which it very much technically was, only used a bow. I mean, the other weapons, but the main weapon was a bow.
And stuff.
And, yeah, eventually.
Machete.
But even though the N64, with its crazy control scheme, you walked with the C-stick. And I find that weird but interesting, because you walk with the C-stick and you change the camera with the actual N64's analog stick. Nothing at that time, not even like GoldenEye, I don't think, operated that.
It was like a pseudo dual stick configuration for
Yeah, because GoldenEye you still move with the analog stick, right? Yep. Yeah, only Turok did that. With the N64's convoluted controller design, I think it's the only game I've ever played, to my knowledge, on the N64 that actually made use of every single appendage of that controller. Because you still use the control pad to select your weapon. So literally, you had and modern day controllers, you have two analog sticks, you have a D-pad, you have buttons, you have shoulder buttons. The N64 was kind of a precursor to this concept coming to life. This is the only game, there's a sequel too, this is the only game I know of that even utilized this. Also, similar to GoldenEye and old school shooters too, keeping that campy atmosphere, there's tons of cheats and silly stuff you can do, big head mode. Oh god, it's hilarious.
And we can't, after Perfect Dark, the developers went on to go and make Time Splitters, right?
Yes, another pretty underrated title, honestly.
Future Perfect, a lot of people will say, is one of the best console shooters of all time.
Yeah.
Best old school ones.
Yeah, especially if you're looking for an FPS that's story-driven, and isn't just a generic Halo clone, which we should probably segue into at that point.
Yeah. Another note I want to make, I want to establish a through line with the aspect of, esports is a big buzzword nowadays, but I think we really saw the genesis of that with the competitive FPS scene.
Yeah, when exactly do you think that actually started, though? Or are we talking... I want to say, so Gateway was... Or not Gateway, sorry. GoldenEye was the first gateway, the first big paradigm shift.
For console FPS.
I want to say Halo was the second. So, do you think the competitive scene started before or after Halo's introduction?
I think a lot of people would attribute the start of, like, the FPS esports scene with, like, Counter-Strike.
Counter-Strike is after Halo, I believe. Isn't it?
Halo's before Counter-Strike.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, there were still people in, like, 98, 97 who were playing, like, Doom 2 over, like, a 56k modem.
But was that, like, did they have tournaments?
No.
Okay, so yeah.
There were communities around it, but it wasn't necessarily an organized thing with leagues and things like that. But it's important that they were there, because in a lot of ways it was the genesis of a lot of the competitive game communities you see now.
Certainly. So in that case, then, I know Halo was originally going to be developed as a first-person shooter for Mac OS.
It was going to be a real-time strategy game before FPS.
Well, Bungie never even did FPSs
we forgot to mention,
before this.
They did Marathon.
What's Marathon?
Marathon was the series that Bungie did on the Mac. It was like the direct predecessor to Halo.
Was it a first-person shooter?
Yes.
Huh.
It was a series of 3 FPS games.
Oh. I did not know that.
You should, because narrative, like, they were considered some of the most narratively interesting FPS games of the time. Like, the whole game is about basically you're going onto these space stations that are all being ruled by, like, 3 different rogue AI, and they all have different personalities that you read through their data logs and stuff. And your goal is to basically kind of unify them. I would seriously recommend looking into them. I think they're pretty much freeware now.
I kind of want to. I think you'd be interested in doing that as well, actually.
I didn't even know that was a thing.
I didn't either.
The Marathon series is pretty fundamental to understanding Bungie as a company. I really highly recommend anyone who's interested in the original Halo series, if they haven't heard of Marathon somehow, to go and play it.
I wonder if Polinsky's heard of that, because he's a walking Halo encyclopedia.
Well, I hope he likes Destiny.
He does.
Yeah. And
1 and 2.
We'll get to that. For better or for worse, I should say.
But Marathon was one of the few games that really... I mean, the narrative was displayed in, like, you would find these computer terminals that would contain messages from the AI that would go and tell you what to do next. So in a lot of ways, it was the first time the FPS was being used as, like, kind of a narrative driver. But that's sort of off topic from what I was talking about. I think it's just important to mention that so we don't, like, kind of not mention it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I might have to look in there. I did not know about that. I know about Bungie's past history with our games they've made and everything in the past. I know I'm more RTS focused. I mean, they started off with the company with selling like freeware and everything on Mac, so it's kind of funny when you think about it. Because Halo was developed for Mac OS, but was bought by Microsoft to be the flagship title for the Xbox.
Yes.
A console created, named after specifically Microsoft's actual DirectX. Yep. Yeah. Little software for your computer for playing video games for graphics hardware acceleration, essentially.
What was interesting about Halo is that not only did it have... Well, the Xbox, how many controller ports did it have?
The original Xbox?
Yes.
4.
So, you could play Halo split screen.
Yes. A Halo right out of the gate. Ironically enough, as I say, was the next, I think, gateway into first-person shooter evolution. Took those traits from GoldenEye and Perfect Dark with N64, which I think started it with consoles, and basically revolutionized it. I mean, I would say one thing, though. The Dreamcast did get Quake.
Yes.
I don't know if it had a split-screen mode.
It also had Unreal.
It did have Unreal, yeah. We forgot to mention that. Yeah.
Unreal Tournament, very important game to mention.
Yeah, I did. So actually, in terms of competitive first-person shooters, then I think Unreal and Quake probably actually start on the PC scene. And the Dreamcast had it, but I highly doubt too many people really did. In a short amount of time it was around.
Gotta have a good SegaNet connection.
Yeah, it just probably wasn't really a thing. I'm sure some people did.
You're playing Phantasy Star Online, let's be real.
Yeah, that's what anybody used.
That's another topic entirely.
Yeah, that's totally different.
That game is a direct predecessor to WoW.
Yeah. So, an interesting thing you see here, though, is all these games that do support that, 4 controller ports.
Yes.
N64, Dreamcast, Xbox. 4 controller ports, multiplayer, split screen.
But then, after that, you started seeing this split off into online multiplayer games.
Right, which still actually started with Xbox.
Yes.
Like we had online multiplayer with Dreamcast, but again, Phantasy Star Online pretty much all really got me in the West was really what's happening. But with Xbox Live, that is where the game really changed. Because before, online gaming was mostly a thing enjoyed by PC gamers, so a device already in front of them that already enjoyed an online connection, because the computer at 56K modem, or a DSL connection if you're, back then, pretty damn well off.
Yeah, or a T1 connection.
Pretty well damn off. Or playing at your local business or something.
I can see if you had like a DSL.
DSL in the 90s was not common. Early 2000s, really early 2000s, not that common either. Mid 2000s where everybody basically had it. I didn't get DSL personally until I was 15 in 2005.
I had Wi-Fi in my house by like 2007.
Yeah, no, I got Wi-Fi immediately afterwards, but getting DSL is a big deal.
Yeah.
That's probably a couple of year generational difference as well, but
that was a major upgrade.
It was, because actually, the amusing thing, I remember now, it's kind of funny, I actually had a wireless router before I had DSL. I wrote this really stupid, cringy blog post on my MySpace. they actually kind of involved to explain the fact that I had a Wi-Fi router, but I didn't have DSL. And I wrote this is a short segue. It's kind of funny, though.
Segue.
It's Segue, whatever. And she remembers this. So in history class, we watched a movie about Spartacus. And I wrote this blog post on MySpace a couple of times about the Chronicles of Spartacus. Spartacus, yeah. The joke here is the fact that I had a character in it that essentially took the Wi-Fi router that was pretty much an amalgamation of me, and I had a lobster arm. Yeah, I don't know what drugs I was on either. But attached the Wi-Fi router to my sword to defeat AOL for broadband version of Andros. If I find this whole thing, because I don't remember it super well, I'll fucking upload it just for shits and giggles.
Yes, please do.
I felt that was a good break to joke about, but I'm dead serious, I wrote that. But yeah, I got DSL and I hooked up the crappy Linksys router a day later. So I had Wi-Fi immediately. But, for my Nintendo DS connection, which Metroid Prime Hunters... online first-person shooter.
That game was a lot better than it really had to be.
Yeah, the multiplayer was a lot better than it really had to be. The single player was terrible.
Technically the DS is the past. Clearly. So that's kind of a wide category that we cast here, but think about it. With the DS, you had the D-pad to move around, then you had the other thing to move, like the camera, and then you had the triggers in the back, right?
Yeah, you did have a lot of people, try to put first-person shooters on the DS. I know definitely
I know Moon was a very good one.
There was a couple. Wasn't there, a Conduit on the DS, too?
No, Conduit was on the Wii.
Wasn't there also a DS one or something?
No, I think the same developers might have made a DS game.
Okay. I guess I must be thinking of something different. I just know Metroid's stylus controls were weird, and then you had, all the generic first-person shooters that were, probably just copies of Call of Duty and that were ported to it. There is actually a DS version the Resident Evil games, technically speaking, on the DS were first-person
Well, there were first-person segments.
Were there first-person segments?
So the Resident Evil DS remake, the one that was the one...
So it was Revelations, wasn't it?
Revelations was on the 3DS.
Was it the 3DS?
That was the third-person shooter.
What was the DS one?
The DS one, the Resident Evil 1 remake on the DS was was just take controls and stuff. It had first-person slashy segments, but it wasn't on an FPS.
Mm.
This is essentially playing the Mercenaries on the DS. Because it wasn't the full story you would get out of the other consoles, for PlayStation. And
Mercenaries in the 3DS was like Resident Evil 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. The gameplay style was like Resident Evil 4.
It was technically there's never been a Resident Evil FPS, interestingly enough.
Yeah.
Technically, I guess...
Umbrella Corps.
Yeah.
Chronicles.
No,
Chronicles was
Chronicles is a light gun game.
Yeah.
It's good. It's
You
fun.
mean Project Umbrella?
Operation Raccoon City.
Operation, I don't know why I said corpse.
Whatever, they're bad. Don't talk about them.
It wasn't a good online game.
That was an example. Let's rewind a bit first. You got way off track.
Yeah.
Which happens a lot.
We should also talk about PSP FPSs too.
We could definitely mention that we did not prepare this one.
There was a Resistance on the PSP. There was also a game Konami made for the PSP.
All right,
Arms.
let's go back to Halo because we're missing tons of. Was that a first-person shooter technically?
Peace Walker was just like a 3 clone.
It was a 3 clone.
3 is not first-person shooter.
That's
technically the PS2 remake of 3 is.
Yeah, that makes more sense. But still, let's go back to Halo for a moment.
Yes,
we're going way overboard here.
Yes.
So starting with Halo, like I said, we had that trend before with the N64 with 4 multiplayer ports, Dreamcast with it, and the Xbox with 4, and then Xbox introduced online gaming, something only PC gamers were enjoying.
And you had to pay.
Yes,
technically with the PC you still had to pay, to an extent.
No, not really.
I
played StarCraft Online for years, and I didn't pay jack.
I remember sometimes GameSpy would charge you money.
That's really nothing anybody actually did, especially because before consoles had you pay online, nobody on their right mind on PC would pay anything. The only thing people would pay for on PC, if anything, was probably to download a software that was like after the trial ran out for freeware stuff, or porn. That's all you paid for on a PC back then. Nobody really even bought anything all that often online.
Yeah, so with Xbox Live, it's like $50 a year, broadband only, which in 2004 was like, what?
Yeah. And Shoes, didn't you have Xbox Live on the regular Xbox?
Very little for Halo. Actually, Halo 1 and Halo 2 I had an Xbox account.
Well, Halo 1 didn't have any online multiplayer, though.
It was
right?
for the second one, then.
Yeah, just the second one did. But that was like an early iteration, though, of how Microsoft was building Xbox Live, which before online gaming very much still relied mostly on like chat rooms and, you know, you just like kind of using an instant messenger or email, whatever, to communicate with each other or voice chat. There was no social platform. Xbox Live was that first attempt at that social platform. Like, there was still a friends list and everything, right? Because I actually didn't have the Xbox Live on regular Xbox. But I do Xbox Live, though, was advertised as that because it came with the headset and everything, with the monthly subscription.
It had like the weird voicemail feature. So I remember my friend like playing. I was at his friend's. He was playing a Halo 2 multiplayer, and then we get like lots of messages afterward, being like, "You're so bad for
oh yeah,
for
God.
like 45 seconds. There would be like gaps in the audio. It'd be like,
oh yeah, well, I'm gonna get the 360 in a moment. I have some. That's when I can tell my tales, because that's when I start playing shooters. Actually, is when we get to that generation. But I didn't play too much of that, but I know that was kind of the building blocks leading towards online multiplayer. And in terms of anything that happened pretty much between Halo with that, I mean, there were similar shooters and stuff. We mentioned Time Splitters and everything. It was also the Splinter Cell series, Shoes.
The Splinter Cell Tom Clancy series?
That was an FPS, really.
No, that
It wasn't
was more
FPS?
like it was more like a tactical, like, stealth.
You're thinking of Tom Clancy.
No, the Splinter Cell.
I know, but I don't know why it's on the list,
but
because
there's
it's not
Tom
an
Clancy
FPS.
Splinter Cell and there's Tom Clancy Rainbow Six.
Rainbow Six.
Yeah.
Rainbow Six, yeah. So, wait, so there's only one of them from a first-person perspective, then?
Yeah, because Splinter Cell is actually not an FPS at all.
It's a stealth game.
Well, if it's espionage, I mean, FPS essentially you just have to be in first person and shoot things.
Yes.
That's
the strict definition of it. And
so,
Splinter Cell is non-FPS.
Okay, so I thought Splinter Cell was a first person.
No.
My bad. I didn't play it.
You should. They're actually... First three are actually really good.
I technically have one that I bought for $5 to use to hack an Xbox later.
Everyone bought that game to hack the Xbox.
Well, it's still $5, thankfully, so yeah.
Oh, I also have a vivid memory of Halo 2 multiplayer. My friend would do the trick where you would go and unplug the internet and then plug it back in. So when you plugged it back in, it would register all the kills you did when the other opponents were frozen.
Oh my god.
This is for the second one or the first one?
Second one.
You can't play the first one online. Oh my god, that's disgusting. Yeah, all my Halo memories are mostly just with him, honestly. He's the main one who played it. They were just fucking around in Gulch and stuff.
Like my friend would be on the console and would be like, I would be down near where the Wi-Fi was connected, and he'd be like, "Do it now!" And then I would unplug it, and then he would be like, "Okay, plug it back in," and then he would win.
That's terrible. This makes me think of the lag switch, though. Does anyone know how to make a lag switch?
But yeah, around the 360, at least around that era, there was also the emergence of like the first like esports FPS stars. Like, what was a Fatality or whatever his name was, right?
I still did not follow.
Who's the dude who sells like the gamer peanuts? That dude.
You got me. You know this guy? You got me.
Remember the first dude who was like the Counter-Strike 1.6 pro.
I forgot. That was about a while.
Point is, you started to see a lot of the first esports celebrity. I mean, there were still StarCraft was around, but I don't think it was as much of like an.
Well, South Korea was already well into esports with things like Warcraft 3 and StarCraft, but
interesting that like
different topic.
Foreign games were the center of that, right?
Yes.
Like, how did Blizzard get into the Korean market? I wonder.
I don't think they got into it directly. I think
because NetCafes just had them.
Yes, it had more so to do with the way their culture was structured in terms of accessibility. Kind of like how RPGs just sell better in Japan than they do in the West.
Because they have more of an audience.
It fits their culture more, too.
We could do a whole thing about how Western RPGs influence the growth of the Japanese RPG, but that's another genre topic altogether.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. That's definitely different. But
so we're Okay, one more example. The Wii had some interesting FPSs too, because you would use the pointer to go and point at the screen. A lot of people argue that's actually a really good way of like structuring an FPS, but you have to deal with the Wii.
I mean, I don't know. I played Metroid Prime 1 and 2 on the GameCube. They're both fantastic games. And Prime 3, while not as good as the first two, it's still a stellar title that I enjoyed. I mean, you played Corruption, right?
Metroid Prime Corruption?
Yeah, Metroid Prime 3 Corruption. I feel like motion controls on the Wii, if they're handled by by Nintendo or
the IR pointer controls for an FPS.
Well, yeah, it's still an FPS. I mean, look, it's a first-person view. You shoot things.
But does it improve? Like, instead of tilting your thing in order to go and like move the viewfinder around, is the pointer inherently a better way of aiming at the enemies?
No. Yeah, I'll be 100% honest with you. If you want the best way to aim at anybody in a first-person shooter, every single time, keyboard and mouse. They were designed originally for the computer, and they're still the absolute best. And this has been tested because there was instances before where, actually with Gears of War, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, it's my favorite. It's a third-person shooter, but honestly, it is worth talking about for this. For a couple of reasons.
Because it was like the counterpart to Halo at the time, right?
Yes. And I actually really wasn't as much into Halo as I got into Gears, but let me mention this first. So regarding the controls themselves, not long ago they did a test with cross-platform play regarding controllers and keyboards. They had PC players for Gears and PC players or Xbox 360 players for Gears. They were going to test out the cross-platform every single time PC won. It's absolutely unfair and people also, there are adapters for the Xbox 360 to convert your keyboard and mouse.
Brooks adapters.
Yeah.
They're $100.
They're and you know why? They're pretty much the easiest way to cheat.
And
unless you really, really suck at the game, it's so easy to just use it and they don't have a prayer. And that's the thing that sucks too, because that means other people you'd be playing this, you have no idea that they actually could be doing that.
Yeah, it's kind of disgusting.
I think with the Wii, though, it's not meant to be about actually the most precise way to get a shot. Let's think about aiming a gun in real life, too. Especially if you aren't used to it. Your hand is shaking, you're anxious, you've never fired a gun before. Yeah, you tell me how precise that is to holding an analog stick where the cursor is practically perfectly straight until you actually fire and get recoil. I think the Wii was meant to feel more realistic. It was meant to feel like you're using your actual arm, to actually point the gun.
Or like the ones that rested on your shoulder. You can buy like the Super Scope things for the Wii, too.
Yeah, they have. Like, you can just buy Link's crossbow training, came with the Wii Zapper, which honestly is not a zapper, it's kind of a joke. Or the Nyko one, which is better in every way. It looks like an actual handgun. But I think those are also, when you really think about it, though, a lot of the shooters on the Wii aren't really so much first-person shooters as they're more like light gun games.
I mean, I think most light gun games that people think of traditionally are the ones that are on like a set track.
Yeah, true. And Metroid and like Conduit kind of deviate from that, but they all still kind of control the same in the sense where even if you show like, in the sense of Metroid, it's Samus's actual cannon moving, but in reality, there's an invisible cursor on that screen that's tracked the whole time, basically, so that it can detect whatever enemy she's shooting at. Which is the same way things like House of the Dead 2 and 3, House of the Dead Overkill work, Umbrella Chronicles with the Resident Evil games. There's a couple other ones, I forget exactly for the Wii, they're also light gun-based games. But in terms of first-person shooter, I think the way it's supposed to feel most of the time, essentially, is you are supposed to have that more precise control. The Wii, I don't think, was ever meant to be about precise controls. It was meant to be about feeling like you were actually doing the thing in real life. Simulating the
verisimilitude.
Simulating the concept of actually holding a gun or a sword, which, first off was just waggle controls with Twilight Princess, and they kind of got it right with Motion Plus with Skyward Sword, and I guess Red Steel 2? Anybody played it? I don't know.
I played Red Steel.
Well, the first one's bad.
Red Steel 2 is the one that's like with the Western.
2's like better. It's still very forgettable, though. Like, the controls are good. It's too bad they didn't make much of a very interesting game outside of that.
I guess we're inching towards the present then, huh?
No, not yet. Not yet.
That's a rush.
I want to see the present, honestly. I have the most to offer regarding that, because it's not entirely the present, it is the past, but it's the present enough. So we talked about Halo. And after Halo, moving to Xbox 360, you had Gears of War, which is a third-person shooter, but I feel it's really important because the game itself, before Halo 3 came out on the 360, it was the shooter everyone was playing, and it also took elements from like Unreal Tournament because it was from Epic Games, old Epic Games, like its horror concepts and everything, and started to revolutionize the idea of playing online games with friends the same way that Halo 2 did, essentially.
Your squad.
Yeah, because before you had the earlier Call of Duties, you had the earlier Battlefields, and you also had like the Perfect Dark game that came out, which does have multiplayer and was a launch title with Xbox Live from the get-go for the 360, but it's not very good.
Yeah.
I also want to state, too, this was also the time right around after Gears of War came out, what I like to call the first-person shooter infestation occurred.
Well, technically, Call of Duty 2 was a really late original Xbox game.
Yeah, well, Call of Duty 3 was on 360 and Wii, and nobody played the Wii version but little kids mostly because it's graphically inferior and you can't really play it online the same with the 360.
But the modern
and the PS3 wasn't really an option.
But the predecessor to the Modern Warfare series was Call of Duty 2, Big Red 1, and 3, right?
Yeah, but they were mostly just present still on the PC. Like, they really weren't that prominent in the console market.
Until 4.
Yeah. 4 that's what I'm getting to, because Gears came out first, and I'm just talking that's in terms of revitalizing that online component. I mean, shoes. How many goddamn hours do you spend playing Gears of War?
I think
online?
At least well over 100.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We beat Insane Mode in co-op, like, several times. You, me, Anthony, Ludzik switching off. Like, that was a social event, playing that game online. Especially because it was also in the first games to get maps, which became a very big thing with first-person shooters, especially nowadays. This was early DLC, but it was before it was like milk the way. There was no season passes. Like, when it announced a console shooter, even though Gears is a third-person shooter, but a console shooter is getting downloadable content, that was like, what? That was a big deal. I think they weren't even bad maps. I remember them. The first two weren't the greatest. And the next one's like, had some innovative ideas with like lasers. So there's this garden that you go into and like poison comes out. So you had to interact with your environment. You could press a button and kill everybody. This was just really cool stuff in terms of giving you more.
Well, technically,
and they weren't that expensive. They're like $10.
I remember, I think one of the first FPSs that had like DLC that wasn't necessarily paid was SOCOM 2 back in the PS2.
Yes.
People forget the whole SOCOM series was really important for... PS2 had a pretty active multiplayer scene alongside the Xbox that a lot of people forget about.
You know what? You're right. I didn't touch on that. It's because I wasn't really part of it. But
SOCOM 1 and SOCOM 2 are incredibly important for early Sony multiplayer culture.
Yeah, especially... And one thing I do know is there's still private services that people play on because they're so religious about this game.
But because the PS2... In order to play online, by the way, you need the network adapter in the official, quote-unquote, PS2 hard drive. And you could download content for SOCOM 2, including additional maps. But they weren't like a paid $5 thing. And there wasn't really paid DLC for the PS2. It was all like either content like generated by other users or just like bonus kind of shit. Unless you were playing Final Fantasy 14. Or 11.
Yes! I love playing Final Fantasy 14 on my 2001 console.
Reminder, just side note, Final Fantasy 11 went as far as like 2012. It was one of the last official PS2 games.
It's still being played. It's still being played.
You can play Final Fantasy 11 on your cell phone now.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just saying, I have a friend who's still playing it. I don't know why, but, let him do his thing.
I will never leave Vanadiel.
He has a souped-up gaming PC, too, by the way. He just wants to play Final Fantasy 11. I don't know why.
Yeah.
It just makes him happy.
I know we're kind of diverging a little bit, but I think it's natural you talk about it. Because people don't always play one game.
No, and it's interesting. No,
Until now, where people all they play is WoW or Dota. LOL is like 25% of all web gaming traffic. It's sad, isn't it?
Oh, we'll get to that eventually.
When did people start only playing one game?
Honestly, I think a lot of people that only play one game don't really slot into the concept of like an actual gamer in the sense of...
I play FIFA. I level up my ultimate team. I increase the bars. I love Barcelona. Or whatever the fuck these teams are called, because I see them on ESPN all the time. Not to make fun of people who like football.
I'm not saying they aren't gamers in the sense of people who still play a video game or a video game series hardcore. It's that they're only focused on that specific... They're more like a consumer. Like, someone can say they're a movie buff, but all they ever do is just watch, like, Transform movies, like the latest action flick that comes out.
Oh, man,
they're
love
not
the
really
22 film
or a film critic, even, but all they ever see is, like, really terrible, like, comedies or something. Like... You have to experience everything, I think, to be an actual game. You have to care about the industry in some shape or form. You have to play different genres. Otherwise, you're kind of just more of a consumer for whatever your preferred genre is, which is fine. But I just don't really consider you part of the culture, essentially.
Or like we're in this weird gap now where like kids might not have a console and they're like, wow, I love Five Nights at Freddy's. I've never played it, but I own the merchandise from Target.
Yeah, that's even
Or like fucking Bendy and the Ink Machine, which you can get that whole game for $5 on Steam right now, but 90% of the audience has not played it.
We played it.
I played it.
It's a good game.
It's a good game.
We need to finish it.
$5, Kidarinos.
I didn't get the last episode yet.
Or you can buy it for $30 on the Xbox One.
No, I just want to buy it for $5 on Steam. But
it's so funny. This is another funny thing. Like, kids... I think this is an observable thing. Kids who are like, they don't play... their parents might not have bought them a console, but they still really like a game because they watch their favorite Let's Player play it.
They're not really gamers.
That's what Ninja does, huh?
It is. They're not really gamers in that regard.
I'm going to stop playing Fortnite so I can watch a dude play Fortnite.
Hey, I stream, and we're about to stream after this, so what does that tell you? Although our audience is definitely not 12-year-olds. I mean, they could show up if they want to,
You're definitely not Ninja.
No, I actually would never want to be Ninja, to be honest, because doing the same thing over and over like that my entire life doesn't sound very fulfilling, no matter how much money.
Then don't do speedrunning.
No, I'm not into... I like doing them for fun. Like, I like doing my favorite games, like Dion Country and Star Fox. They're also very short.
FPSs are some of the most speedrunnable games on the planet.
Oh yeah, they're really short. I mean, you could speedrun Gears, even. It's kind of hard, but you could do it.
It's an interesting little branch of the competitive scene. Instead of competing against other people directly, you're competing against other people like on the side, kind of.
Yeah, it's almost like basically in the similar sense of like competing against people to like just get a higher score, like in the arcade days.
Yeah, except it's in sheer time.
Yeah, which is honestly... Oh wait, Nintendo invented that. It was called the World Championships.
Yeah. So, what we're getting into, I think, is we're kind of inching... Do we have anything in the past to talk about?
Yes, you keep trying to get to esports. You don't realize how much happened before you get to that. There's a lot that happened before we get fully into esports. Now, I'm talking about before Modern Warfare. Yeah. Modern Warfare really is what made Call of Duty itself kind of be recognized as the de facto social shooter.
Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, to be specific.
Yes, Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare is the subtitle by Infinity Ward. It was the de facto first-person shooter that made socializing on the 360 and the PS3 at this point the thing to do for console first-person shooters. And the follow-up with that, Modern Warfare 2, is the best-selling first-person shooter of all time.
For a good reason, it's fantastic.
It is a good game. It really is.
Good single-player campaign, good multiplayer campaign.
That they copied 7 times.
Well, if it ain't broke.
Enter the Wasteland. So, after right around this level... I mean, there was already some pretty mediocre first-person shooters. Also, single-player first-person shooters with really mediocre multiplayer. And some really good multiplayer. Some even based purely on multiplayer that are good. One thing I actually should mention... So you had Counter-Strike we talked about, which is from Half-Life. And then you have Team Fortress, which is still technically a first-person shooter.
It was a mod off of... We also have to mention a lot of these early FPSs were based off of the Half-Life engine.
Yeah.
So,
which started on PC, but then came to console.
Yeah, I mean, Team Fortress, the original one, as well as Counter-Strike were both mods of the original Half-Life, and the developers brought it to Valve to make them into official products.
Yep. But also, regarding those, you also had Half-Life in terms of horror and everything. So first-person shooters started to get away from, I'd say I'm coming at this point, is that campy, really like over-the-top
one
action
was still kind of
sense.
campy.
Yeah, well, Halo introduced story elements already that were more sci-fi-esque, like something you'd see out of similar to like a Star Wars story. Not a Star Wars, like a space opera, but like
Half-Life 1 was a sea change.
yeah. Yeah, so shooters essentially evolved from, I would say, first-person shooters specifically evolved from...
Go shoot demons in hell too. Let's go and explore a man like trying to save the entire human race from aliens.
It got more depth. I'm not saying like it got like full-on Shakespeare, but it got more depth, for sure.
Well, the whole first hour of Half-Life is like a gaming masterpiece.
Yeah. And then also, in terms of how evolution goes, you also have things like Duke Nukem, too, which started off as a top-down perspective or 2D perspective? No, it was like 2D side-scroll perspective, right? The original
Duke Nukem 1?
Yeah.
I've never played it.
I believe the original Duke Nukem was like that, but then Duke Nukem 3D, though, was an FPS, basically. It was like over-the-top, had sexual humor, over-the-top violence, he shot aliens, he spat out one-liners from, like, all the great 90s movies, Terminator, Independence.
Shove it up your ass.
I'm here to kick ass and chew gum, and I'm all out of gum. You know, all those, basically.
Got balls of steel.
Exactly. Which is interesting because another evolution of first-person shooters, which will segue into the future that you keep wanting to get to, and I'm not ready to get to it yet.
Present.
I honestly still don't want to get to it. Borderlands.
CQ.
Borderlands, the looter shooter. That's another evolution of the first-person shooter, is where I even remember the actual advertisement, the trailer for Borderlands was the RPG and the first-person shooter had a baby. So we had a first-person shooter that had RPG mechanics in it. Remember, aside from multi-layered gamers like ourselves, you know, high-quality class multi-layered gamers, we only play everything.
I'm a friggin' layer.
You're an onion. But anyway, that played everything. Mostly that played shooters and stuff in that sense, especially around this time. Kind of like your average college dude bros. Like, you know, they didn't really maybe they played Mario when they were kids, you know, but that's it. They have no memories of probably Mega Man or any of the classics from NES, Super Nintendo and stuff. It was just be mostly kid stuff, maybe Pokemon, but all they do is just, I got my Xbox to play Halo with the boys and Call of Duty, and then probably you'd see like a stack of NBA 2K games or some sports-related junk. Which, that's your thing, fine, but I can't really stand them, and they're worthless. Your games will never be worth anything. And nor will these shooters, and that's where this Wasteland thing came from, too, is the success of Modern Warfare 2 and shooters in general led to so many generic, pushed-out, first-person shooters. I'm not going to name them, but I'm just going to show them in the video for this podcast. I'm just going to flip through them. The Haze is one I know that I absolutely hated. You remember that game, right?
Yep.
God, why did that exist? That's also when I think, as far as like the Tom Clancy, I think they also started producing more shooters too, like out the ass like crazy. Capcom pushed Resident Evil into more of a first-person shooter perspective, like we said before, with Operation Raccoon City, and it just kept pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. All this junk first-person shooters, all trying to piggyback off of pretty much the success of Halo. Gears fall with that, and I'd say Call of Duty pretty much in that order. And here comes Borderlands, which took concepts from what's essentially, you know, a nerd loser concept, RPGs, role-playing. Yeah, but again, even Diablo was played by nerds. You're not going to see, very rarely, a bunch of college frats sitting around a 360 or even a regular Xbox, you know, passing out six-packs, playing Diablo. It's just...
Well, Diablo 3 is like the perfect Skinner box, arguably.
That's future. Well, it's still past, but it's present-ish. I don't know. This is very difficult to categorize, isn't it?
Well, I mean, at least we have plenty of material.
I had a ton of material. Like I said, once we got into this generation, I had a ton of stuff to throw in. My point with Borderlands, though, is that paved the way for more stuff that I'm going to get to shortly. But it was a huge deviation. Before, you still had shooters that played like shooters, where you basically shot something, got ammo, got health, got armor, whatever, and kept going. Left 4 Dead, for example, deviated with like the horror elements and Gears with that too. Any more traditional, they stayed the same. Call of Duty mostly stayed the same, but just really upgraded the formula in terms of all the extra stuff you could do, like calling down tactical nukes and stuff, where you get so many kills in a kill streak.
Nuketown.
Oh god, that map. God, that map.
Everyone loves Nuketown.
I actually hate it, to be honest. It just kind of, spawn, die. Spawn, die. That's what that map was. You spawn, you die. It's called Nuketown. It's called Nuketown. It is the map that you go and you spawn and die. It's true.
Camping Ground 101.
Yeah. You couldn't camp in Nuketown. You couldn't camp. You need to hide to camp. Nuketown is just spawn, run, dead.
Interesting.
Spawn, run, dead.
Introducing a lot of
spawn, knife. Alright, I'm done.
A lot of the early vocabulary for like the FPS scene kind of emerged around that era too, huh?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, camping,
Teabagging.
spawning.
Teabagging was so infamous that it featured at the fucking Game Awards. Like, if someone went on for too long with their speech, they would start to get teabagged by a guy in a soldier costume.
God, do the Game Awards actually have personality then?
The Game Awards, when they were on Spike, they're a head trip. They're all on YouTube, and they're all a disaster.
We should riff them sometime.
The first one, I remember, like, they announced the Game of the Year at the very beginning, and it was the current Madden game of that year.
It's always got.
Oh wait, I think I remember that. Didn't they have like a bunch of cheerleaders and stuff come out? You know, even I gotta say at that point, it's just being stupid. Like, what Madden players? Whoa, I gotta watch the Game Awards on Spike.
Well, it was weird.
Then I'm gonna watch the Giants. Like, that just doesn't. That sentence does not happen.
It was like really a weird time capsule because you had shit like Samuel L. Jackson name dropping Katamari Damacy. Like, okay.
That sounds like a golden moment in history.
It was great, and there was like the intro part where like parodied the intro.
But you're saying they were out of touch there. Oh, they weren't out of touch with fucking 2019? Seriously? Ninja giving out awards with one of the Muppets? What? You joking right now?
I mean, they're both owned by Disney.
Oh god, yeah, that's why. Okay, that all makes sense now. It's the fucking mouse. It all makes sense.
The mouse.
All this innovation with first-person shooters, and you still had a ton of crap. And that leads into where things got really oversaturated. An early thing with Battle Royale, you had MAG on the PlayStation 3, which was supposed to be this big cooperative first-person shooter that had like elements of like Team Fortress in it, where you had different roles, and it flopped horribly. It was supposed to be like over 100 people could play on MAG.
MAG was like the predecessor to the Battle Royale formula.
Yes, that's what I just said. Exactly, it was, but we weren't there yet. Not that I ever wanted to be there, but we are now.
You can still buy copies of MAG.
I have it. I don't know why.
You can find sealed copies of MAG really easily.
But I think it's offline though.
I know, but
so it's literally a paperweight, which Games as a Service. I'm so glad I bought that game. Actually, I didn't buy it. I think actually I was given it. I don't think I know.
That and the game Starhawk.
That new.
That and the game Starhawk are also paperweights.
Starhawk was good. Like, it's what Star Fox could be online.
Yeah.
But that's not a first-person shooter. So now we can move into the current consoles. Remember the looter shooters of Borderlands? Yeah. That's now a thing.
Every game is a looter shooter.
Yeah. So that was very important for me to mention this, because Destiny happened. And quick recap, Destiny is what happens when Bungie leaves Microsoft, signs a deal with Activision Blizzard, and produces a sort of Halo-inspired Borderlands massively online multiplayer-only looter shooter. Which some people really like. I personally found it to be very lacking in content and personality. And it doesn't seem like it's going to get any better.
It's all level grinding. I thought it was the most boringest game I ever purchased.
I played it with my girlfriend.
It's a Skinner box.
Oh.
Yeah. I played with my girlfriend for a month when we got it. We had a little fun. I'm going to say, there were moments we had genuine fun, probably because Peter Dinklage gave a fantastic performance as the Ghost.
That wizard came from the moon.
But everything else in that game was just so slow paced. The dialogue was boring and dry. The characters were uninteresting. There weren't really characters just so much as there were avatars. Like, it's one thing to, I would say, have an avatar character you have to create. It's not where everybody is an avatar, and it's really uninteresting. And even with the single player campaign, which isn't really single player, but it plays like a single player campaign where it's more like co-op, but they advertise it like it was a massive MMO. Like, Borderlands had personality, for sure. And the sequel did too. The characters were a lot more lively. Claptrap, their mascot, was extremely recognizable. But
the whole story behind the guy who voices him, right?
What's the story behind him?
So it was just some dude who did like marketing for Gearbox who volunteered to do the voice.
Right.
And, he did it through pre-sequel. Then he quit Gearbox and started working at another company, and Pitchfork called him up, was like, hey, will you do Claptrap for the next game? He was like, okay, pay me. And he was like, no.
So we have two different Claptrap voices then?
Yeah.
What I'm getting at regarding Borderlands and Destiny and the comparisons is basically this looter shooter thing took off big time. Turns out both nerds and dude bros, essentially, I guess I could say, not full-on gamers, but people that like first-person shooters and just trying to play popular games, both like it when a game has RPG and shooter mechanics, because they were still successful. The ratings tanked, but they didn't care. They still sold really, really well, and you can pick them up now for pretty much anything. I mean, Destiny was free last year, I think, basically, on the PC. And Destiny 2 is probably going to follow suit. I already talked about Destiny in depth in games as a service and the DLC and microtransactions. I don't think there's anything further to say regarding that. But as far as the evolution of first-person shooters, well, pretty much following Destiny, you have Anthem, which is even more uninspired, more generic. And unlike Destiny, which at least I think had some of the personality and love from Halo somewhere in there that the fans were seeing in the expanded lore, this game has absolutely none of that. It is the most bland, dry, uninspired Destiny knockoff, if you want the honest truth, I think I've ever seen. It shows, because it tanked. There's nothing it did to innovate first-person shooters, despite the E3 trailer showing all these amazing effects and stuff. They were all lies. The jumping and everything, the jetpacks were nothing like they really are. And then, if you think about, okay, so that these things are generic, these generic looter shooters, why don't we bring back more games like the past campy ones? And I'm going to segue into your retro idea of the return of retro shooters, which is happening, but I want to also show where mistakes can happen too. So the same developer, Gearbox, got the rights to finish the development of what was essentially thought to be vaporware, Duke Nukem Forever.
Gearbox is a publisher.
Gearbox is the publisher, technically, now. Okay. They were a dev at one point, weren't they?
I mean, they made their first projects were Half-Life expansion packs.
Oh, okay. So Gearbox is a publisher, but
they have internal development studios.
Yeah, like 2K. Don't they own 2K now or something?
I would have to look that up. But
yeah, I'll tell you. It was. I know Gearbox is responsible for. Let's just put it that way. Gearbox was responsible for securing the publishing rights of the game. That much I can confirm.
Yes.
Because they literally had an E3 opening trailer with Claptrap having a one back and forth with Duke and everything. Everybody was all hyped for Duke Nukem Forever, and it didn't do well.
What was so funny is that Duke Nukem Forever entered development hell because they were trying to chase trends in the FPS market to begin with. There was one point in development where they were had a whole 2 hour long, hour or something sequence where Duke was doing the Half-Life thing. So they more or less didn't really have a coherent vision from it, and it suffered from not being able to evolve to the current market of FPSs at the time.
Yeah, I will say one thing though, since I did play it, it's funny. At the very least, it's funny. There was a lot of heart in it. It's just the sum of its parts aren't as good as the whole, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Shoes, I know you played Duke Nukem Forever. What are your thoughts on that exactly?
Duke Nukem Forever?
Yeah.
That's one of the few of them I played. I mean, I don't know. I thought it could have been better after saying that I actually finished the game.
Yeah. What do you think would have made it better?
The gameplay, mechanics for the player controls. for like Duke himself when you're like moving around through the levels.
Yeah, I also felt like they tacked in like too many. Here's another thing too. A lot of these shooters now are really zeroed in on just one form of gameplay, but the more campier ones and everything had like multiple things going on. So like Doom and Forever was the example of like packing in too much of those like driving segments and stuff, and all kinds of weird mini games that you could play in it. Now they're all zeroed in on just this is the core shooting gameplay, whether it's just straight first-person shooter, run, spawn, die in team deathmatch.
Make your stupid meter fill up.
Or looter shooter, consistently do raids over and over.
Level up your character, go up your skill tree.
Get a different colored gun that's rare than the other one, even though it's a color swap.
Or, better yet, get a loot box that contains a random color of a gun.
Same thing, really. Well, okay, so originally it was level up and get a better gun. Now it's level up and get a loot box that might have a better gun. Fairly soon, eventually, it's going to be when you hit enough experience points, you get the option to see if you level up. I think I might seriously kill myself if it gets to that point. I'm not even joking.
Loot box that contains experience.
Like seriously, could gaming get that bad? Do you think this could happen? Like, seriously, it gets to the point where you're playing the game.
No, I would love it.
And now, instead of getting a level up with experience points, you get to spin a roulette wheel to see if how many experience points you get.
I mean,
or how many levels you gain.
There is an RPG like that, Unlimited Saga.
I mean, it doesn't work, at least?
Barely.
Oh, God. Well, let's hope it doesn't.
I want a first-person shooter that when you get, like, a headshot, there should be a function where you can, like, it connects to, like, an app on your phone. You can take, like, a selfie with, like, the person you killed.
I actually like this idea. I don't know why, but that sounds hilarious. Just seeing people, like...
You would have 5 seconds to do it, but if you do it, you get, like, a bonus.
Like, seeing people Kingdom Hearts 3 Sora style, just, like...
Like, literally in front of their TV, like, with the person that... Like, the corpse of the character they killed.
I mean, that would be impressive, honestly. I wouldn't even be mad. That's... Like, to get up in front of your TV, take the picture, and get back on the controller. I mean, that's...
It would just be riffing on, like, people's, like...
It would riff on selfie culture, but that's pretty funny. But... Alright, I think I've basically explained as much as I can regarding this evolution from, I would say, the Halo days into the looter shooters and everything now.
And then,
so you could talk about your retro revival now.
Yeah, so there are a couple of... Not only are people still making mods for like all their favorite games to go and add new maps and stuff. TF2's got an amazing workshop. Well, that's... Yeah,
Team Fortress 2 is never going to die.
Yeah, that's going to be like the perennial Valve. That's like the... Aside from Half-Life, I think it's one of the best Valve like shooters.
I personally prefer Left 4 Dead, but it's a good game.
Yeah, we had barely touched upon that, but basically, Team Fortress 2 has the workshop, and a lot of the workshop content, people just love making random content for Team Fortress 2 years and years later, and it's incorporated into the official updates, which I think is amazing. And then meanwhile, we got the whole, we mentioned the idea of making, not only do you have like retro style games like we mentioned on the last podcast, like, oh, let's make a Mega Man but not call it Mega Man, but it's in the style and the gameplay loop of Mega Man. We're seeing that for early 3D first person shooters like Quake.
You know, something cute actually. There is a first person Quake style Mega Man game.
Oh, that's fun.
It's not real. It's fan made, but it's fun. Yeah, it's pixelated graphics layered on a 3D environment.
Yeah.
It plays well, surprisingly.
Yeah, so the ones I wanted to mention that are like the retro revival shooters, more in the lines of like Quake, are Dusk, Ion Maiden, and Wrath Aeon of Ruin. So the main thing with Wrath Aeon of Ruin is that it actually is running on a pretty decently modified Quake 1 engine, and it was a fan project that is actually being officially published by 3D Realms, and the dev team features members of the Quake modding community. Which I think is really neat, that if a game can be made on that kind of limited engine, I think anything is really possible with these fans. It's like the Sonic Mania of Quake.
Yeah, basically, and that's really cool. It's good to see too that It's great that as a budding game developer myself, or aspiring one anyway, engines are free now. Before they cost several $1,000s just to either make or you just get the license to use them. But it's really cool to still say you can make a game on anything. Even old software can still pull its own weight behind the right team, behind the right minds. It's absolutely fascinating.
And along the esports lines, now there's a huge industry for FPSs and esports. Not only were they among the first to be really monetized and turned into leagues and have teams with sponsors, have big open competitions for it. Like the CSGO tournament is one of the biggest FPS tournaments in the whole esports scene.
Yeah, and before when we talked about the beginning of Counter-Strike, Halo, Gears of War, Call of Duty, before we had a massive esports scene like it is now, you had like tournaments and stuff popping up now in like local game stores and malls. Like, shoes, you played in a Halo tournament, I think, actually, before and everything, right?
Halo 2, actually.
How'd you do?
I don't remember. I think it was like 15 out of whatever. So it was pretty good. I mean, it was
what
like
number is whatever?
I think it was like 15 out of like 100 or something like that.
That's not bad. That's
yeah,
pretty good.
So it was a small group, like it was a small tournament and stuff like that. Yeah.
But basically, that was where sponsorships and stuff started. It was still a very uncommon thing. Like, maybe you'd see some coverage of it on something like G4. But online, Twitch and Justin TV still weren't really things then if we're talking early 2000s. But now in esports, it's... Well, honestly, I think it's going to surpass football and everything at this rate.
Good. I mean, it's...
Boston's getting an esports stadium. Not joking.
Oh boy.
So I mean, it's only getting bigger. And if that's your thing, congrats, it's not going away. But as far as what that did for first-person shooters, it's probably one of the most accessible genre these days. Whereas years ago, it's interesting to think it was actually a rarity, especially on console. Now it's everywhere.
Definitely.
I do think at least, though, after the 360 PS3 generation, the shovelware of first-person shooters died down.
Yes, by far. Because now it's all about here's the big games that everyone's talking about, and there's not a lot of room for people to kind of compete in the middle.
No.
People still kind of try, but it's not like it's within certain niches. Like, you're not going to play Destiny 2 if you're really interested in, like, a realistic FPS, like, depicting a certain period of war.
Yeah. Unless, and those are usually like...
play Red Orchestra if you want that.
Yeah, I was going to say I have it, actually, yeah. Another shooter I enjoyed, actually, it was kind of like a Left 4 Dead clone that I have really fond memories of, was Killing Floor. That's really fun.
Don't you mean Evolve?
No. Evolve was part of that trash heap of, broken promises and lies and stuff.
It was made by the Left 4 Dead developers.
I know, but they can do bad things, too.
Are they making that game like something for rot now?
Just make Left 4 Dead 3, please.
They were at some point.
Just go back and make it.
Hell, Team Fortress 3 was being made in 2015, but they canned it.
I mean, that was the issue with first-person shooters, though. Left 4 Dead made, everybody wants zombies. Like, Call of Duty just had to have zombies now.
Zombies mode. Like, these modes got more and more elaborate with every Call of Duty game.
Like, it was okay at first. It was a funny tongue-in-cheek thing. But now, playing as Ronald Reagan with a laser gun is hilarious. I can't deny that was hilarious in Black Ops. But, alright, after a certain point, this needs to end.
Speaking of which, what do you think are the future of FPS, Fred?
So, I'm going to be honest with you, it's kind of unclear. The one thing to state on the present, though, they're not first-person shooters, but I do feel like Battle Royale is going to have an effect. The third person. Right now, I don't really think Battle Royale has to be third person.
This is another discussion I wanted to bring up. Do you think that, okay, so when you're playing as Master Chief in Halo, in first person, you're embodying him as a character. You're going through his journey. You're playing through this, the agent. There's the agent versus avatar thing. Where avatar, you're making a character, it's supposed to be you. Agent, you're playing as a particular person within the world, within the lore. So, do you think when Gears of War came out and you're playing as Marcus Phoenix and you could see him lumbering around and doing all this stuff, do you think that made a bigger connection than when you were behind the mask of Master Chief?
For me personally, yes, because I actually seriously hate first-person perspective. I deal with it if
Okay, then we did a whole hour-long episode about
Yeah, but
this.
surprisingly, I still knew quite a bit about it after a certain point. As I still played several of them, because just because I don't like one thing about the game, doesn't mean I won't play it if I enjoy everything else, essentially, like Borderlands and stuff.
Yeah, there's plenty of games like that. Not every game's going to grok with you completely.
No, it's also, I think, more of like a motion sickness thing. I mean, I did suffer from seizures as a kid, so who the hell knows what's going on in my head?
Sorry to hear that.
Don't worry about it. But the point is, I actually do think it does. I do like seeing Marcus Phoenix and stuff, because, you know, that big bulking body. Okay, I wasn't going. Just making a joke. No, there was actually a lot of seriously, like, ridiculous over-the-top gay jokes about Gears because of how ridiculous...
Gears has a lot of gay fan art.
There's a lot... They're really bulky men. Well, at least the armor makes them even bigger than they really are.
Yeah.
That was why I was making the joke.
So my point is, do you think character customization and things and being able to see that character within the world really made those games more popular versus that of an FPS where it's like, oh, I can get a new costume for my Overwatch character. Great. I can never see it.
Yeah.
Unless I die.
The problem with that, and I think it's why it appeals...
We didn't talk about Overwatch at all, by the way, but I don't think...
I mean,
it's not
Overwatch is a thing. Did you know that? If you know what a first-person shooter is, I'm sure you know what Overwatch is.
But the thing with Overwatch, though, is that it's like the most casual FPS.
Yeah, it wouldn't exist if it wasn't for everything we just talked about, though.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
It is a culmination of starting with early things with Doom to the multiplayer concepts of GoldenEye,
and
all
TF2.
the way down to Halo to TF2, which is probably where its roots are as far as the team combatant stuff, where it has different classes and everything, as well as the online multiplayer aspects of console. Even though it's a PC game, it is on consoles, and people do play it on consoles somehow. Again, that keyboard PC thing can seriously be an issue with cross-platform play, but some people get through it. What I want to say, though, regarding the future with that, and what you're saying with the Avatar, though...
You think it's going to be replaced by third-person shooters because, like, you can more easily see who you're playing as, and it's you?
Yes and no. I want to first address what I stated earlier with just being a consumer of a particular genre and being, in my definition only, a gamer. In my definition, a gamer is somebody that appreciates gaming as a hobby or more, and immerses themselves in the actual culture of video games. I'm not saying you have to go super in depth with like studying developers or anything. You can go at your own rate of that stuff. But
at that point, you're more of a journalist or a researcher.
Yeah, I do it. Is this journalism? I don't know what this is, but
there is a negative connotation to being gamers.
Yeah, what I'm stating is it's in the same sense you call somebody a jock versus going over to your friend's house to watch the football game and have a beer or something. Are you really a jock? No, the jock is the guy that has the sports jerseys and knows all this stuff about the teams and everything, and, you know,
it's like
is super immersed in the culture. And a lot of the Fortnite, the Battle Royale games, a lot of the Call of Duty games, a lot of the mainstream type shooter games, and then every sports game, most people that follow them or buy them are the average consumer that enjoys the genre but doesn't really go any further than that.
Or like you're 12 and your friends are playing it, so that's what you play.
Yeah, which again fits in with like the concept of going over to watch the game and have a beer, even though you're not super invested in the game, whereas other people might literally make that a massive part of their life, which is fine. And that's what I'm trying to get at. I think people can understand that without feeling offended. If you only ever play side-scrollers, but you still like are immersed in the culture of side-scroller development, you're still a gamer. But if you're literally just playing something because all your friends are and stuff, I think at that point you're just a consumer. Which is fine. Everybody has varying degrees of interest with it. But in terms of how the industry is shaped, it can go multiple ways. I think we will still see first-person shooters that are story-driven with actual narratives, and I think they're going to push further away from quite a lot of the customization in terms of gimmicks, because when you get down to it, gimmicks really are what they are, essentially. I mean, I understand different armor has different attributes and stuff, but when you're dressing up your character to look like the Avengers, it's a gimmick. There's really no way around this. It's a gimmick.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, you're going to have, along with the Battle Royale genre, which is obviously everybody wants a piece of the Fortnite and the PUBG pie now, those games aren't going to care about story. They're not really going to care about individual character narratives. They're going to focus more so on just the experience with multiple people online, where the game is just fun because you're having fun with your friends, regardless of the game's quality, for the most part, to be honest. And it's popular. And popularity, unfortunately, like it or not, does have a large effect on something. There are things that are popular that, in my opinion, are very lackluster in effort, and things that aren't popular that are amazing.
90% of everything is crap, right?
Yeah, that is a rule, technically speaking.
Also, you're mentioning narrative innovation, but what about mechanical innovation?
Yep, I was getting to that. There's definitely still room for growth, but it is difficult to innovate any genre these days when you really think about it. What hasn't been done is a very difficult question to answer, with probably very few answers, if you want the honest truth at this point. It's like the Simpsons did it thing. They did everything, trying to find something else. There's still some untapped concepts. Harmonix, creator of Guitar Hero and Rock Band.
They were creating a rhythm FPS.
Yeah, it was called Chroma. It never saw the light of day, but essentially, if you remember the way Guitar Hero was played with the scrolling notes, or any of the rhythm game,
they were trying to combine the note gameplay with the FPS gameplay.
It didn't work, but it was basically going to play out like a multiplayer only, like Overwatch style, like shooter, basically, with rhythm game mechanics.
And they were trying really hard. They were prototyping things with the developers of CSGO.
Yeah, I'm not hating on this idea. It just sounds like it was in development hell forever.
Well, what happened was what Harmonix usually does nowadays is they have like small teams that come up with innovative ideas, and they give them some money to go and like prototype it and turn it into a product. That's how they made their music card game, Dropmix, which is a Hasbro product that's kind of chugging along, even though it's not super popular. So with Chroma, what ended up happening is they had a closed alpha, and the feedback was just like, this doesn't work. It's kind of neat, but there's just not really much here that is really accessible. So they just kind of shelved it indefinitely.
Yeah, I mean,
it's sad because I think there's a lot of potential with rhythm-based combat, as like they said in a PAX East panel that I went to a couple years ago.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely sounds interesting, and it's definitely a good way to stand out from the crowd. I played an indie rhythm-based shooter at a local game store recently, but I can't remember the name of it for the life of me, and I couldn't find it before recording this, but if I find it, I'm definitely going to stick it in the description and show a clip of it probably in the video. If I can find it.
Recently, as in like last fall.
Yeah, it wasn't too long ago, about half a year ago or so. But, yeah, that played pretty well. It was pretty fun. That was single player, too, actually. It kind of played, it wasn't on rails, but you worked times, so it felt like it was on rails. It was very interesting. So there are things you can still do with it. I would really love to see more use of light gun-based shooters with the first-person budget and concepts. Like, I'd love to see light gun shooters make a return with like first person shooter like kind of budgets in the sense of something like Call of Duty, and that I think that would be really cool. But to market it to a massive audience is not an easy thing to do when those games usually require that, because they require a ton of money from shareholders and investors. But I think the way the future is going to go definitely is, I think shooters are going to split off into these two different categories. Dead Space, no one I didn't mention either, too, technically speaking, is a first-person shooter. Also, again, more of the horror concept.
Is
it third person?
Dead Space is directly inspired off of Resident Evil 4.
Is it really?
Yes.
So probably third person and first person, they're barely any different. It's just perspective.
I suppose, but there's a lot of mechanical differences.
But the gameplay is almost identical. Not to mention there are games where you could switch between third and first person.
Sure.
I think it's worth mentioning here, like I mentioned Gears essentially. Shooters in general can have a single-player, story-driven narrative and be good games, and even still have a multiplayer element, although I think the ones that try to do both that were kind of part of that garbage heap of the oversaturation.
Yeah.
One game I remember playing, and Shoes get away on this, The Darkness.
Yeah, that first one was a trip.
Yeah, that game was a mess. The single-player campaign was already kind of meh, and the multiplayer was just a joke that just died instantly. Like, I think the servers were active for a while, and like nobody was on after the first few months of that game's release.
I can only play the second one on PC.
I don't want my own.
It's sad because The Darkness is actually a really cool property.
It's a great property. It just was not handled well at all.
Where's the movie? It's only real if it's a movie.
And a Subway coupon. The guy like fed like coupon, like he fed Subway coupons to a cat, I think is what he said. It was like, God, this game was so weird.
But the sequel was a big improvement from the first one.
Did it have Mike Patton though?
Yeah, they still had him in the second one. They kept him in that one. They fixed the player controls. The storyline was actually a lot. I would say it was more in depth in the second one than the first one.
For the uninitiated, The Darkness is about, well, it's basically like about a dude who has like a bunch of demons that are kind of like he can control, and Mike Patton of the band Faith No More, who has an incredible vocal range, plays the titular Darkness.
Yeah, the Darkness voice itself is awesome. It's Jackie. That guy is such a character. But Mike, finish your explanation.
Oh, I was saying the step where I lost my train of thought is in the second one they fixed the battle controls for Jackie instead of the first one. They're like really, really clunky and hard to like maneuver and stuff. And there was a lot of like glitches and like graphical glitches as well in the environment in the first one that they actually were able to like fix in the second one with the different engine that they used. I mean, you played the multiplayer.
I didn't play the multiplayer.
You didn't play the multiplayer?
I didn't play the second one at all. I did play the multiplayer of one. That was
I have the second one. You should borrow it and play it because it's actually really, really good.
Is it split screen? Can we even play the multiplayer now?
I'm pretty sure they still kept it split screen because I know it was local.
Yeah, sure. Oh,
local and I think it was network. So
why not? I'm down for that.
Yeah. Oh, and final thought about the retro revival stuff. I think there definitely should be a lot more of those. I think it's really cool that people are looking into early 3D polygonal stuff in terms of like the 3D games. Not only you're seeing some 3D platformers that are in the style like Super Mario 64 and things. So I think there's definitely a lot more room for that to be developed. There's like a 19-year-old kid who's making a Quake game. It's one of the top Quake-like games.
God damn. But yeah, honestly, I think independent developers are going to be the ones to carry the torch for a lot of this stuff. What I was talking about in terms of that shift, I was talking purely AAA. You either have narrative-focused single-player, or you probably have online multiplayer. Because EA Games says nobody plays single-player games anymore. Right, EA?
Yeah, no one wants demos anymore, so they can just, $60.
So they can just sell you the demo. For $60.
Or what they're doing is, have you heard of the rumors about the new PlayStation Plus?
No.
PlayStation Plus, Plus Plus or Plus Prime or some crap? Or
Super
Plus Squared.
So, what they're offering is, you'll not only be able to have private servers, but we'll give you, exclusive access to alphas and betas.
You mean the thing we were already getting for years before?
Yeah.
Like, you know how you got literally... If you bought Crackdown, you got the demo to Halo 3 online, you got the beta?
Yeah, so they want to sell you a beta.
That makes me sick to my stomach.
Hey, at least it's not like, enter in your email, you might get a key.
Support independent developers. They give more shit about you than these people do, I'll tell you that right now.
Definitely.
Maybe not all of them, but majority.
That's where you see the real innovation, people.
It is, honestly. I really don't know anymore what's even going on with the AAA industry.
Well, hopefully, we might see... I don't know, are we going to see unions?
What I'm afraid of is, publishers keep buying stuff out. I mean...
You always see,
Epic Games just bought Rocket League's company, right? And people are rioting. This is off topic. We're at the end anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So we can just talk about whatever. Epic Games just bought
Psyonix.
Yeah, Psyonix, the Rocket League company, and they are raging. And Rocket League's going off the Steam store.
Psyonix's excuse is that it's the money that they're getting. They were not going to get like any real overhead from the company that will own them now. It's more or less about, well, we need some company that gives us money to support our esports platform, which arguably has been Rocket League's fulcrum for many years.
That's absolutely ridiculous, though. They have plenty of money. It literally comes down to greed at this point.
Yeah, they come a long way from their PS3 predecessor to Rocket League, super-powered rocket powered battle card, whatever the fuck it was called.
I have no idea what that was.
It came out in 2012.
I don't play the game personally. I don't play anything that has these kind of community followings. I'm a very antisocial person half the time. I don't know. I get more invested in single player experiences mostly, but I appreciate them for existing and making other people happy. Believe me, I do.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think honestly, all the innovation for all genres is moving closer to independent. Independent these days isn't even defined by one person or two people. Independent seems to even be a small company worth $1 million. I'm not kidding. $1 million is small these days, which is a terrifying concept to think about when I want to fund video game projects.
Technically, Platinum Games is independent.
Yeah, that hurts to even think about.
Let's hope that who could scoop them up, really?
Nobody. I don't think.
I think Nintendo buying them would be
I mean, Kamiya would freak the hell out anyway.
I think Kamiya just wants to make another Beautiful Joe.
Well, after Capcom, I don't think he'll ever want to work for a publisher again.
They need to make another Beautiful Joe, honestly.
They need... Well, they can. Well, Capcom's got a revival going on. I mean, Resident Evil 7, Mega Man 11, RE2 Remake, Devil May Cry 5, I want my X9. I can see a Beautiful Joe happening.
What they need to do is remake 1 entirely in 2D.
Wasn't it already in 2D?
It was 2.5D.
What's wrong with 2.5D if that was the game's original art style?
But, like the box art. What if the entire game was like the box art?
I mean, I think that's subjective.
I think that would look fantastic.
It could, but it might also be insanely time-consuming.
Yeah. Okay, so my final thoughts are, even though FPSs aren't necessarily my favorite genre, I still recognize that a lot of the patterns that are happening in any genre between the AAA and the indie spaces are important to keep a track of. And because they were the genesis of the biggest money-making thing in games right now, esports, it's important to keep an eye on it. Because there are a lot of practices that could not necessarily be the best for developers, that cause them to go and work for years and years and years on one game and might not even come out or be supported for very long, that people need to keep an eye out for.
Yeah, I agree.
Companies like Treyarch, which worked on the best Tony Hawk games ever, were shunted over to work for Call of Duty DLC.
Yeah.
And ports, right?
Well, they did originally actually start with the Black Ops series and stuff, so... Actually, what they really started with was World at War. Actually, it was Treyarch's first.
But that's so sad when a real developer moves on just to make supplementary content.
I mean, the first ones were the same exact engine, but they were their own games. But yeah, I told you, they took Modern Warfare 2 and cloned it 7 times or whatever. It's not far from that number. I'm exaggerating, but it's true.
Yeah. Then, Shoes, you got any final thoughts?
Yeah, in terms of first-person shooters and where they're going.
Where do you think they're going to go?
It's really hard to say because, like I said, I think that it will split into 2 different directions. One with the independent developers and AAA titles, but I feel that there's a lot more responses for independent games, and they're actually picking up a lot more at a rapid and steady pace. For as far as AAA goes, for well-known studios like Capcom and Konami and Electronic Arts, all that stuff. I could see probably for the future there might be a new first-person shooter that's not your typical Call of Duty or Halo or Gears of War or I think there's Division 2 is the newest Tom Clancy game. So does show some sort of promise or potential in the future that they could have not a new Halo, but another newer concept for FPSs.
In Division 2, a single player, yeah, but it's Honestly, I really don't know. First person, third person, they're still very similar.
Yeah.
But also another Division 2, if I recall, does have like a lot of the RPG mechanics with it too.
You just watch bars fill up. It's a Ubisoft game.
Do you watch bars fill up? Okay.
Like, I was watching my friend play for like 15 minutes today over at my other friend's house. I'm like, that's all you do in the fucking game.
Is that all you're doing?
Like, you go and you hide behind cover, people shoot at you, okay, you shoot back, you run around, you wait for your ammo to refill.
Yes, that's still Gears too. Don't explain it so vaguely. I'm sure there's more to it than just that. But yeah, Shoes, what you were saying, as far as Division 2, didn't that have like innovative concepts in the sense where it was kind of borrowing some of the RPG concepts from like the looter shooters and putting it into a single player campaign, or like a co-op not a single player campaign, it was a co-op campaign, because Division was all about co-op, right?
It was all Division 1 and 2, they are co-op campaign.
Yeah. And it's like, I think it has like the loot boxes and stuff in it, but like more so in the sense of you kind of like get them as you play through the co-op campaign.
Well, it's the loot box that you're thinking of is not set up exactly identical as like Borderlands. It's more of like you get your upgrades and stuff like through experiences. And
yes, that's how I was trying to get you to explain it.
Yeah, but it is kind of in that concept, but not really. But it's more of just like you get more XP for finishing missions or doing different things in a certain time, and there's like a lot of like different level grinding and tedious tasks you have to do. I've only played the first one. I haven't played the second one. Like that's the new hype for like as far as like that type of game goes.
Right.
I actually haven't played a really good FPS in a while that I couldn't put down, which was probably like either a Gears or a Halo game. So I'm still waiting for that new first person shooter per se.
And where do you think the latest Gears and the latest Halo fell off?
That's a
you
tough
do
one.
Halo. You do Halo. I'll do Gears.
Like, what do you mean?
I know we're about to end, but I think this is interesting.
No, it's fine. Mike, you explain Halo. I'll explain Gears in their current state.
Well, like, what do you mean by fell off?
The latest Halo. Why is it bad compared to the old ones that you liked?
Well, I don't know. I actually stopped playing after really like 3.
No, you played 4.
I did play 4. No, I actually played 3, 4, and then after that I said, if they make a 5 and 6, I'm not going to play it.
5 Guardians came out.
So 5 is basically very similar to 4. So explain what you hate about 4 is what I'm trying to get you to do.
I've actually vaguely forgot any experiences with 4 because I actually
didn't
like it.
There you go, everyone.
That's not a good explanation.
No, but I try to really recall, like, what did I really absolutely hate about that game, and I can't remember.
Doesn't it just amount to, like...
It's repetition, really, actually, because after this third one and the fourth one, it was just like I don't know, like, people play... Alright, so Halo, mostly they play for online multiplayer games. Like, you know, like, Capture a Flag, you know, Team Slayer, and all that stuff. But when you do play the storyline, it was basically like, after the third one, they kind of ran out how to end the games. So, like, the fourth one, I think it really set me off as a story. It wasn't really the multiplayer. The multiplayer features and stuff are gradually getting better. They were fixing things and making it, you know, not really easier, but they were definitely like, they would go from making the most overpowered weapon, like the battle rifle, and then in the fourth one, like, alright, we're gonna dumb that down because that's too powerful. So, like, there was, like, stuff like that was, you know, from going from, like, 3, 4, and 5, and etc. I just think really the thing that made it really bad was, like, I felt like when I finished the storyline in 4, it was just like I finished the third one a second time.
Oh, who's that bad?
So they just literally just like copied all
Copy and paste would be the correct term to use.
Yeah. Man, how about that compared to ODST?
That, you know what, that's another day right there. That's another explanation on another day. Because I could talk about, other than the Halo games, like Halo 1, 2, 3, and 4, I could talk about Halo Reach, Halo Wars, RTS, real-time strategy, and Halo ODST, which is supposed to have its like own prologue backstory before like the first one.
Well, it was just supposed to be a 3-hour DLC to Halo 3, but then Microsoft's like, no, put a second disc in with all the Halo 3 maps and sell it as a $60 game.
Right.
which is disgusting.
But it also goes back to what you're saying with the DLC with the first-person shooters. Like years, it actually DLC meant something. It wasn't a money marketing machine.
Yeah, where it starting to move to that point with season passes and stuff like that.
You better buy the maps or you'll see X's on the matchmaking, and that'll be embarrassing.
So that brings me to why I absolutely loathe Gears of War 4 and where it's moving forward with its new developer, Coalition. So Gears of War 1, 2, and 3 essentially are great games.
Made by Cliffy B's old company.
Yes, by the original Epic Games that essentially did a great job of taking a concept that worked and building off it and improving it with each game. The first one had some team deathmatch type stuff, Warzone, in terms of just multiplayer, capture the flag kind of things with annex settings. So it took stuff from Halo regarding that. It also evolved all the mechanics with it because it had more elements of strategy. Sure, you had your basic assault rifle, you had a chainsaw on your gun, you could saw enemies in half. You had a torque bow. You had, you could really call a satellite in the sky and project what essentially I referred to as a Dragonite's hyper beam onto people and blow them the fuck up, which was fantastic. Which was used in the story. They used the guns from the multiplayer and in the story identically, so it was like, oh, I've been here before in the campaign. It's just like the story, and it has the same gun from the story there. So that one part of the story where I used the gun to defeat the boss or the large monster, the Hammer of Dawn it was referred to as, that brought the big light down. Oh, that was in this multiplayer map, because this map is the part where that happened. That was cool. There was things like that. And the second one evolved further with a horde mode, where you can actually, instead of just playing against people online, now you can really spawn enemies, and you and your friends can team up and actually go through waves, like Killing Floor or Left 4 Dead, of enemies, and rank up that way too, and have fun seeing how many waves you can get through and how long you can survive not dying. Because if you die, that's it. That was the goal. Not everyone dies, and you make it through the wave. And the third one, I'm not spoiling anything with story-wise, but as far as the multiplayer innovation stuff goes, they threw in everything but the kitchen sink, basically, all the way up to the point where you can play as every single enemy in the game. And a thing called Brood Mode against the Cog, against other Locusts. It was crazy. Gears 3 just had everything they could have threw at it. The spin-off Judgment was not made by Epic Games, and I really don't know why it exists. Don't play it. It has some stuff to do with the story with Baird, but I didn't waste my time with it. It has nowhere near the amount of content as 3. So the reason why I said this is because Gears of War 4 didn't do any of that! Instead, the campaign recycles the Locust, which is supposed to be basically dead at this point, by bringing them back through plot bullshit. And introduces a bunch of characters that we really didn't grow up with, like Marcus Phoenix's son, through a campaign that kind of feels like teenage rebellion kind of thing. It's very uninspired compared to the original story, which was essentially breaking free this war veteran that was wrongfully thrown in jail for, well, not wrongfully, but essentially just, he abandoned his team, basically. But he's one of the best soldiers they had. So they broke him out of jail to finish the war against the Locusts that were fighting back against the Cog, essentially, on their planet Sarah for, well, kind of ruining it, really, when you think about it, kind of like pollution and stuff. So you had a story that had multiple layers of stuff going on, and you reduced it to the most bare minimum thing where Marcus Phoenix gets captured eventually as the hero's dad, and you gotta save him. And where Gears of War had a lot of really... This is something where shooters still did stuff where they weren't just online multiplayer or just shoot things. Gears had driving segments inside this crazy giant tank thing where instead of shooting like rockets at, there was these enemy called the Krill, which are basically locusts on steroids. They only come out at night, but they will eat and devour anything, and when they move, it's like the bat from Castlevania. It's like all the little bats turn to the big one. That's how they move. This giant tank doesn't have any cannons. It just has a big light that shines on them because light kills them. And you navigate that through what was essentially a city that had no power. So imagine like going through like Gotham City, but it was like just black. So innovations like this, Gears of War 4 has none of that.
Yeah, that's sad.
Instead of moving through the campaign with run and gun cover, and then the driving segments, and then the other things that introduce you new weapons, you slow the hell down and play tower defense for an hour. Where you literally stay in the same map for over an hour defending waves of enemies, the most uninspired, garbage, and this happens multiple times. There's literally a part where you're just on an elevator for almost 30 minutes, I think, just shooting waves of an elevator! A fucking elevator! I'm gonna have footage shown for this. Gears of War 1, mines. Gears of War 2, you have emulsion mines, like, flowing. You have lava. You traverse all these interesting worlds. Gears of War 4 elevator. It's random refugee camp thing where you're just manning turrets for an hour and then building walls, which is innovative, but it takes away from that propelled movement. And I'm just bitching about the campaign. Multiplayer, garbage. Gears of War, as I said before, I wanted to give it credit for giving, the first DLC packs, the first map packs, I think, honestly, ever seen in that sense, at least I've ever seen, for console online shooters. Nope! Take your pick. We got loot boxes. We got crappy trading cards you gotta collect. We got literally armor that's nothing but recolored skins that you can either grind your ass off to open a box to maybe get, or you can spend real money. We got almost every single character in the multiplayer locked on the disc that you have to get through grinding with loot boxes or spending real money, but all of it's on the disc. Fuck you.
Yeah, so that's a good...
The series is dead to me.
So it's a good microcosm of what we've been talking about for 2 hours, huh?
Independent developers, if you're listening, make the spiritual successor to Gears of War. I'm there day one. I'm buying the biggest limited edition you come out with.
Or just make
I don't have the money to make it myself yet. Maybe one day. Before you say that.
Well, I'd be looking forward to it. Alright, so that about wraps up our discussion on first-person shooters. I'm Deft Beck.
I'm Gamer Rez.
No shoes.
And thank you very much for listening to another edition of the Pixel Vision podcast. Have a great time period of which you are listening to it.
Yeah, also, let us, as always, let us know below, comments, like, subscribe, video, all that,
Follow
stuff
me.
you expect to hear at the end. Call to action, buzzword, stuff like that. But actually, I know we skipped probably a ton of stuff too. I have to admit, this episode was probably the least organized one of the 5 we've done so far.
We still came up with some interesting little ad hoc discussions.
I had a lot of things to still contribute to it. Like I said, I was still actively part of this genre for quite a while during the 360 PS3 era. But I know I still missed a lot of things like Killzone already off the top of my head. There's just only so much I can cover this. But I want to hear from anybody that actually listens, though. What do you think helped shape the first person, and just just the shooter genre in general? What do you think helped shape it? Where do you think it's going? Do you like it? Is it good? Is it bad? Do you want to vomit because of season passes? I do.
At least you're not having online multiplayer passes to get in the door like Sony used to have.
Oh, you just want to keep poking the beehive, don't you?
Yeah.
Till next time, folks.
All right. Thank you very much.